My name is Katie Hess, and I'm almost 40 years old right now, which I can't believe I'm saying that. I live in Baltimore, Maryland, and I work for the public school system here. In my family, we have the genetic disease called adrenoleukodystrophy, ALD. I found out that I am a carrier of ALD when I turned 21. I knew about the disease in my family prior because my brother, who's 2 years older than me, was diagnosed when he was 14 years old and I was 12 years old. Usually for boys with ALD, they have cerebral complications. My brother is in a rare, small group of people that is affected similar to Addison's disease. However, this year in October, there was a small brain lesion that developed on his yearly MRI for the first time. He's going down a different path with treatment right now. So generally, one thing that you can predict about ALD is that it is different from generation to generation. Most often, younger male boys will have, a slow cerebral shutdown and will not, live very long. But you can see in my brother's case, he was just basically Addison's only. So it's a really different scenario. And then, some men don't know they have it at all. So as a carrier woman, I am showing no symptoms right now. My mother and my aunt are both carriers as well. My mom is asymptomatic, but my aunt has, back problems and some leg problems, nerve issues, which is common in many carrier women of ALD. So this was really a long journey. I married my husband in 2006 when I was 24 years old. And at that time, we visited a genetic counselor at Johns Hopkins Hospital. And at that time, the options were pretty limited. It was kind of like, well, you can choose not to have children, you could adopt a child, or you could have a child naturally and undergo prenatal testing just for early diagnosis. So at that time, the genetic counselor explained to us that, ALD affects each generation very differently. So just because my brother didn't have early onset cerebral issues wouldn't mean that our future son would not. So at that time, PGD wasn't mentioned as an option. So we left that meeting and we felt just super overwhelmed. We felt scared and we didn't want to really risk having a sick child with the knowledge that we had. So, we were open to adoption, but that's a big decision that we just wanted to think about. I really wanted to have a healthy child. So we kind of put family planning on a back burner for a few years. 5 years later, in 2010, my primary care physician referred us to Shady Grove Fertility Center in Baltimore for a consultation. And at that time, I was 29 years old. So we were so pleased at that time to discover that science had really advanced in those last 5 years since we first went to Hopkins. And now we could undergo IVF with the pre-implementation genetic diagnosis, the PGD. So we met with a doctor at that fertility clinic and we learned about the whole process. And we also met with an outside geneticist, which may be different now. I would imagine maybe they have a geneticist in-house. The meeting with the geneticist was honestly like very overwhelming. It was really sciencey and a little more cold than everybody that we met with in the clinic. But we decided this was definitely the path we wanted to go down, even though it was overwhelming. So our family members had blood work done at Kennedy Krieger Institute. So we could already identify that exact chromosomal mutation in our family. And then that data was passed on to the fertility clinic and the geneticist. So It was a long journey, really. So starting to think about it in, 2006, and then finally like getting to the decision in 2010. And then we did end up having a healthy girl in 2013. So it was a long journey to get there, and it was totally worth it, of course. Having the knowledge that, we could have a sick child, um, we felt like now that we have this knowledge, we know it's in our family tree, we know that it can vary from generation to generation. We decided we really had to go for the IVF and PGD process. So this process was really challenging, just like emotionally, as you can imagine. It was challenging like physically on my body, challenging for our relationship because it really was life-changing with patterns, and also logistically challenging dealing with insurance companies. So, at first our insurance company denied the coverage of the process. And so we had to get our doctor at Shady Grove and a neurologist at Kennedy Krieger Institute to write what's called a letter of medical necessity, which basically stated that the cost of us having an affected son would greatly outweigh the cost of the IVF PGD process. So this was like one step in the process that wasn't in the plan. And that's kind of common, I think. There are things that are unexpected that pop up throughout the process. So our case went to a committee of doctors. I called each week to check on the process of the claim, and then the panel eventually decided to approve the process. So that whole portion, just getting started, was really challenging. It was taxing emotionally, it was worrisome, but it worked out for sure. And then we underwent the whole IVF process just like a normal couple struggling with fertility would undergo. We did the same exact steps at the clinic that others would go through. So for me personally, the IVF process was doable. It was at times really taxing on my body and emotional, but for me, it was doable. So at that time, all of the IVF items were really sent in the mail, and it was kind of on me, like making phone calls and getting things here on time. Everything's really time sensitive, being home when the box arrives and unpacking it, making sure I know what's in there. I would imagine things are maybe more streamlined now, and hopefully they are. But the nurses at the clinic were really helpful with my husband and I, teaching us how to do all the shots at home, which was a bit scary and totally shocking that we were doing so much at home. And then for me, it was easier to separate like my work life and my home life. I know that's not the same for everybody, but for me, I just chose not to tell anyone outside of my family that we were going through this in case it didn't work. But also, like, I had to go to work and just separate from the whole process because it is very taxing. So after the ovarian stimulation and then the egg retrieval steps, we were super relieved because that first part had been successful. And then my body could kind of reset and take a small break. So that first part of the process involved, a lot of logistical things like going to the clinic before work, to getting blood work done and things like that. But for me, it was doable. And then after the embryos were created, they were frozen and they were sent away to the PGD process. And one day I just got a call on the phone saying, like, this many embryos are affected males, this many are unaffected males, carrier females and unaffected females. I'll literally never forget this call because I'm a teacher. So I was waiting for this call forever, and the call came. And I got somebody to like cover my class, and I went in a closet and was like on the phone taking notes. So we decided to keep all of the unaffected embryos, and then we donated the affected embryos for ALD research. So we ended up with 3 embryos that were refrozen and sent back to Shady Grove Clinic. And then we prepared for the frozen embryo transfer, which is, like the last step, and you almost want to like take a deep breath, but you can't yet because there's a major part coming up here. So that involved like the thickening of the uterine lining, and then a trigger shot at the end that my husband gave me. Then once my body was ready, the embryo was implanted. So part of this process is you really just can't plan ahead too much. You don't know what to expect. So this first transfer was not successful for us. It was a few days before Christmas. It was super difficult because we put all of this time and energy into the process, and then it didn't work. And it was such a letdown and really disappointing. So that was challenging. So we decided to take like 4 months off just to reset and let my body recover. The clinic was ready to jump right back in, and I kind of like knew we needed a break. So the next step was starting another frozen cycle. So it's not the entire IVF cycle all over again. It's just that frozen embryo transfer and priming my body for that. So we did a second one of those, and we were monitored by Shady Grove Fertility Clinic really closely. The embryo implanted successfully. And of course, I was nervous like every single step of the way until probably like 20 weeks. And then I felt like I could breathe a small sigh of relief there. So all along the way, there are different challenges, but I just recommend looking at the next step, like one step at a time, because the big picture can be really overwhelming. And there's some unknowns and things that can happen along the way. So for me, it was just looking at what is the one next step and how can we get that done? And that helped me through some of the challenges. I think it would have been really helpful for me to have kind of a mentor along the way or someone who had been through it to help me with each step. So if I could tell myself back at the beginning, I would encourage me to like reach out to others, someone who had been through the process or something similar, because it would have been really helpful. I mean, I kind of wanted to keep it to myself and keep it in our household and not put it out in the world. But looking back, it might have actually been easier if more people would have known and could have supported me. So that's one thing just to consider is who to let into this process, who would be supportive and, you know, who might just kind of get in the way a little bit. So that's one thing I was thinking of. And at the time, PGD was so new. I don't think they really could have connected me with anyone nearby who had done something similar. Now I hear of it often. For all different diseases. But at the time, it was so new, I didn't know of anyone who had done it. And I'm not sure anyone, even at the fertility clinic, was going through it at the time. But I think having a mentor along the way would have been really game changing, just to help emotionally, just to listen and support and say, I know this is challenging, but you're going to get to the next step. One thing that I think is super important is just to have that support system, whether it's your spouse or significant other on the ride with you or your family. You know, just letting someone into the process, because you will need support and someone who's like a great listener. So, you know, I was really fortunate to have a really supportive husband, who was with me every step of the way, literally like medically giving me the shots, but also emotionally, because this process, it's really hard on your relationship, you know, changes everything because for a while, this is your life, like this whole process is your life. So, you know, if you are in a relationship with someone, just try to take breaks together to do normal things that you used to do for fun. Like it's okay to take a break and just like go to a concert or do something normal because this really can take over. It's a lot. So I definitely suggest taking breaks and like it's okay to do some fun things, even though this is a very serious time.